Kelly Orchard's podcast for successful badassery, as we once more pave the way to getting licensed to be badass. Turn up your energy with Fruitful Friday. Here's Kelly Orchard.
All right, there we go. We're turning up the energy on this Fruitful Friday. That's right, I'm Kelly Orchard, the Badass Certifier. How you doing, badass? That doesn't get old, does it? Being called badass. That's why you keep coming back. Hopefully, that's one of the reasons why you come back. The other is because, well, you're badass and you just want the tools to continue to be certified. So, so today we're going to be talking about love again, because February is National Heart Month, and I am a heart failure survivor. So that's why all this month I'm giving away my first book. It's a prescriptive memoir, Heart Lessons. You can download it right away for free. Or if you would like to purchase a physical copy of it, and I'll even sign it for you, badass. Yeah, there's links for both of those are in the show notes today. We're going to be talking about some apples because this is Fruitful Friday, and then I'm going to give you some positive attitude vibes for your weekend. All things that matter to your heart, for your mind, body, and spirit. That's what we're focusing on this month because we want to focus on positive memories and experiences as I certify badasses one podcast at a time. So let's get started, shall we? I cannot tell you how often I hear people speak about how miserable they are in their job. I speak about my dad a lot because he was an example of knowing what he loves and making a career of it. That man never worked a day in his life because his hobby, his passion, which was radio, became his career. I've always admired that and use his story as an example to others that I work with. Now, it might be not be possible for you just to quit your job, but you've got to find a way to love what you do. The infamous Johnny Carson loved what he did, and he was quoted as saying, "Never continue in a job you don't enjoy. If you're happy in what you're doing, you'll like yourself. You'll have inner peace. And if you have that, you will have more success than you could possibly have imagined." So consider that as you continue to work towards successful badassery. Do you love what you do? Maya Angelou once said, "My great hope is to laugh as much as I cry, to get my work done and to try to love somebody and have the courage to accept the love in return." Too often we say things like this, but misunderstood the last line. To accept the love in return. Receiving love is as important as giving love. I too can be guilty of this, and people who are important to me occasionally have to remind me that by not accepting their love, I am robbing them of some joy. Powerful reminders, wouldn't you agree? Jesus Christ said all of the commandments, "You shall not commit adultery, you shall not kill, you shall not steal, and you shall not covet," and so on, are summed up in this single command. You must love your neighbor as yourself. It's not always easy to be open, vulnerable, and completely authentic with people. We must be careful with whom we share our deepest heart, but it will be worth it when we do. You can strengthen the love in your relationships when you pay attention to the small things about your family and friends and what they do for you. Here are 4 tips on how you can strengthen that love. Show more gratitude. Develop a mindset of gratitude is essential for inner peace. When your cup is full, stop pouring and take a few minutes out of each day to be thankful for what you have. If you try these tips to strengthen the love in your relationships on a daily basis, chances are you'll be happier. John Lennon said, "We've got this gift of love, but love is like a precious plant. You can't just accept it and leave it in the cupboard or just think it's going to get on by itself. You've got to keep watering it. Then you've got to really look after it and nurture it." So these have been some of Kelly Orchard's Apple a Day for Fruitful Friday. Did you know that you can get these daily by subscribing to Kelly Orchard's Apple a Day podcast on this same platform you're listening to the podcast for successful badassery? Imagine that.
A growing attitude changes when it encounters courage. It becomes badass. Fruitful Fridays with Kelly Orchard's Apple a Day and Weekend Vibes.
Being that this is National Heart Month, part of my Fruitful Fridays all of this month is sharing a little bit of my heart lessons with you. Now, remember, I'm a heart failure survivor, and I suffered from heart failure back in 2006. And that set me on a journey of not only derailing my life and my career and my finances, but also I went into a depression, that something I had never experienced before. And I experienced some lessons in grief, and that's what I want to share with you today, is some lessons in grief. This is from my book, Heart Lessons. Grief is to feel deep, acute sorrow or distress. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Other words for grief are despair, misfortune, distress, pain, regret. Stages of grief, according to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. My heart failure led to grief, the end of the life I thought I was going to have. I know grief. I've experienced it and have journeyed through it countless times, alone and with others. In the midst of a crisis, we don't realize that we are actually grieving the lost, mostly because just the idea of the word grief brings up images of death. Grief and loss symptoms don't always coincide with the death of a person or a pet. In this instance, my grief and loss symptoms developed over the loss of a life I thought I was going to have, the loss of pursuing a powerful career, the loss of summer, the loss of my financial stability, the loss of my healthy body and lifestyle. I think I've seen or been to as many funerals in my life as I've been to weddings. Some of my most significant moments have been at memorial service for somebody I knew, loved, and lost. The most profound loss in my life at this time was my brother Buck. He was only 23 when he succumbed to injuries sustained in a car accident. I was 19 and we'd been fighting for a long time. It could have been just sibling stuff. I've been counseled for it, sought therapy to help me come to terms with unresolved guilt and grief. It's now been more than 30 years and I still feel the significance of the loss. Grief will manifest itself in many ways, and it doesn't always resolve or revolve around the physical death of a person or a pet. Oh yes, I was grieving. The following journal entries show every stage of grief: the anger, the bargaining, the depression, the denial, and later the acceptance. But like life, grief is not linear. We weave in and out of the stages and even experiencing them simultaneously at times, and it's an ongoing process. I worked as a grief counselor while I was in grad school and then for quite a while afterward, and continue to educate clients on the grief that is for real. It comes in waves and symptoms will appear due to any kind of loss. So let's define the loss: death, a medical diagnosis, a job or career, relationship, financial, housing, children leaving home. Any type of loss will present you with symptoms of grief. It's important to know the symptoms and be able to identify them. Once you're aware that you're actually grieving, you will be able to understand your reactions and then make decisions on how you might wish to respond to it. There are times where you just need to allow yourself to grieve the loss. I want to remind you again that these chapters are not sequential. In the chapter before, and those to come, I jump from one period to another as a jagged staircase of a crisis is not linear. I may have made a choice to surrender to my health crisis, but it occurred in the midst of my ongoing symptoms of grief and the discoveries and lessons that I continued to learn. So as you will read about in future chapters. So I talk about in July having several bad days. First, doctor's orders to lay low and take it easy. He won't even allow me to drive my Mustang. I completely have to rely on others to get me places. The medication makes me weak. My heartbeat is still irregular, and the blood pressure pills make me feel like I'm passing out. Some days I feel okay, others not so great. So as we move on through this chapter in grief, I want to share that it is really imperative that you understand the family system of dynamics when you're in the midst of any type of life-changing or life-derailing event. It's not all about you. There are others that are feeling the stages of grief as well: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. So while I'm feeling the sting over the reactions of those close to me, although it was painful, Eventually, I understood that they too were scared and in distress and merely acting out on those feelings. Is this happening in your life too? If you feel as though you aren't getting the kind of sympathy, empathy, or support that you need from those around you, you might want to consider wearing their shoes for a while. And as hard as it is, take a step back and imagine what they might be experiencing while this event is occurring. For example, if you're the one who's been diagnosed with a medical condition, or it is you who just lost your job or suffered the financial emergency, try for a moment to put yourself in the lives of those who will be directly affected by what has happened to you. The same goes for those watching your children leave home, or your spouse is getting ready to retire, or has lost their job. It could be helpful to imagine yourself in their world. Only then will you be able to appreciate and empathize with how they are responding. I doubt my own future now. This is from another journal entry. I live doctor appointment to doctor appointment, or mortgage payment to mortgage payment. My hope of being a well-paid radio executive is fleeting. My hope of being a successful writer is dying. My hope of being a dancer choreographer is dead. I could still die from a cardiac episode. Some days I really think it's possible. Last night was one of them. I was so uncomfortable. I long for a ray of hope and peace. I pray for joy and happiness and good health. I pray for new hopes and dreams that will allow me to live. Something, Lord, anything to give me a reason to be happy. One little thing. You know, that was a journal entry that I wrote in 2007. And as I read that, I almost get emotional now reading it once again because my prayers were answered. Look at me. I am a writer. And even though I may not be a successful broadcast executive, look what I'm doing right now. I have a podcast that I'm broadcasting out to you with a positive message for joy and happiness and good health. I want you to see, it's like I am living proof that when you start changing the way you think about what has happened in your life, when you change your perspective, everything can change. I promise you that. Now, the reactions to grief must be allowed to be expressed. Whenever you're going through right now, whatever it is, whatever the crisis, you are struggling with grief and loss. And I hope that by hearing this or reading about all of the symptoms manifested in my journals, it'll shed some light for you that what you're experiencing is normal reaction to loss. I'm not sharing them with you so that you will feel sorry for me. I don't need sympathy. I did rewrite my future. I did become a writer. Once I accepted the lessons that needed to be learned and learned the most important one, follow your heart wherever it is leading you, even in grief. So let's just review the stages of grief before we close out with our segment of getting some positive vibes going. All right. The stages of grief are denial. Denial doesn't only mean that you deny the existence of the problem. Is it possible that you are in denial that it is having a significant impact on how you are functioning? Anger. It's okay to be angry and resentful. That too is a normal reaction. It's imperative that you understand and value that those around you will have feelings of anger too. Try to be mindful of that also. Bargaining. It is normal to feel helpless and want to regain control. We might wonder and ask the if-onlys and the what-if in any circumstance. Depression. Depression symptoms come in many forms, from laying on the couch in a huddled mess of tears to outright irritability and hostility towards others. How do you sleep? Eat? How are you functioning on a daily basis? If you are experiencing signs of depression, you might want to seek help and get it from a mental health professional. Acceptance. This is not the final stage of your grief. You might accept the situation one moment and flow right back into denial or bargaining the next. Don't confuse acceptance as being the final stage. Today, you might read all of this and say, okay, I'm moving on. And next week, you might succumb to one of the other stages. That too, completely normal. Grief is one heart lesson that, unfortunately, must be learned over and over again in a variety of forms. There are countless resources readily at your disposal for educating and understanding grief. And I thank you so much for being right here with me as we continue to focus on love as a positive emotion. You can get through whatever crisis you have when you change your thoughts and how you deal with it and how you cope with it. So I want to thank you for being badass and for continuing to come here. Isn't that right? We are badass. So, what do you say?
Now you know, this is badass territory. No sniveling. A growing attitude changes when it encounters courage. It becomes badass.
So, I wrote that book a long time ago, and I don't read it all that often, clearly. But, man, that Lessons in Grief still gets me every time. And I think because what I tell you and what I share is really true and authentic. I was in a point of deep despair where I thought my life was over. And what was I going to do? I mean, was I going to die? And even if I didn't die, what was I going to do to rebuild my life? But I did rebuild my life, and here I am doing exactly what I love to do, and nothing that I do feels like work. I want that for you too. But I think my biggest goal for you right now is not that I just want that for you. I just don't want you to take as long as I did to get there. So keep coming back. I really appreciate it. All right, so weekend vibes on this Fruitful Friday. Okay, I will have more of Heart Lessons in the future or for Fruitful Fridays, but you can grab your free copy today and just get through it. All right, the link is in the download in the show notes, along with the link to purchase a physical copy if you'd like one of those. Heck, badass. I will even sign it for you. So for our weekend vibes, it's like really important for you to do something that nourishes your mind, body, and spirit. All right. So that can be as simple as organizing your closet or your garage, or learning a new recipe, or digging into a good book. Whatever it is that nourishes your soul. Heck, maybe it's crafting. For me, it's always dancing, or heck, something like this, doing a podcast. Just make it an important appointment this weekend. And then remember, for your badass soundtrack, make sure you're listening to something fun while you're at it. Something that you love, something that's going to help set the mood and the tone. And then attach a song that you are listening to that warm and happy memory. Because while we build songs from our past to stir up your badass attitude and your successful badassery, let's also be building and growing from here forward. All right. So thank you so much for joining me on today's Fruitful Friday. We covered that it's National Heart Month. For the month of February, I'm giving away heart lessons absolutely for free. Or you can purchase a physical copy of your own. Links are both in the show notes. So also remember to focus on positive memories and experiences. Have a great weekend, badass. And I hope I'll see you back in the seat of the Mustang on Monday for Mustang Monday. It's coming up.
What's this 2B Badass 2? Sounds like a code or a password, 2B Badass 2. Actually, it's what happens when you listen to Kelly Orchard and get your attitude certified to be Badass 2. Be sure to subscribe and hop on the bus to Badassville. Monday, again, we turn up the energy. Tune in and tune up. Be bold. Be brave. Be confident. Be badass.
Thanks for listening and getting one step closer to being licensed to be badass. Be sure to subscribe to continue on the bus to Badassville. Snag your Badass Habits ebook at licensedtobebadass.com. You can stay in the slow lane and get just enough tools for successful badassery, one podcast at a time. Or you can join the Badass Ambassador crew in the fast lane by checking your baggage with my Licensed to Be Badass integrated program with videos, worksheets, and group coaching for motivation, mindset, and a fresh approach to living a fruitfully badass life.